3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to the Thurston County Board work session. This is, again, we're finishing up on budget this morning, and we've got emergency services, but I think we're starting with public health and social services. And this is October 4th. No, it's not 14th. Today's what, the 16th, October 16th, 2020. And I'm John Hutchings, the chair of the board. We also have Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser, Commissioner Gary Edwards, County Manager Romero Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and we have, let me see who else. Well, we have Public Health and Social Services Director Shelley Slaughter, and our TST Manager Carrie Hennon. And would you please, oh, yeah, Kip, good to see you. Skip, do we have, am I missing anybody? I have Patty Rosetto and Olivia Outman and Wendy Tanner. Am I missing anybody, Romero?
Yes, you are. And I can't read their names. Let me get closer.
Bob Jones.
I have Wendy Tanner, Bob Jones, Marilyn Roberts, and I apologize. The name that I have is just is Skip S. So.
Yes, Skip. And Marilyn, good to see you, young lady. Good to see you. And we're off and running. And thanks for joining us, Skip, too. Okay, so I'm starting with you, Robin. Go ahead.
Yep. So welcome to the last day of budget presentations. It's been a full 2 weeks, and we are wrapping up today with a presentation by our treatment sales tax program manager, Carrie Hennon. And then later this morning, you'll hear from Kurt Harden about emergency services. And then we'll close this morning with next steps. And that will be a preview of the schedule for the budget for the rest of the year, as well as the discussion on the property tax levy and the 1% increase versus the IPD. So more to come on that later this morning. But now I'm happy to turn it over to Shelley and Carrie.
Yeah, may I interrupt and ask a question? From a few days ago, we're still going to complete some of the TST funding from the previous PHSS briefing that we had in addition to today.
That's correct. And you should have TST information in your binders under, looks like it will be tab 29 in your binders. So it should all be in there.
And also there is a copy of all that information with you today. It should be on your desk.
Oh, that's what's in tab 29?
There's new information on our desks?
Yeah, there should be a copy of the presentation as well as a large copy of the 10-year financial plan.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Very good. Because I'm running out of room on this desk. Got it.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you so much, Robin, for that nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here today. I also want to thank the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Board members who have joined us today and also have made very thoughtful recommendations that are included in today's budget presentation. Also want to thank Carrie Hennon for her amazing work and expertise, and she's going to walk you through this presentation. We know we only have an hour and we have a lot to cover. This is a complex fund, Treatment Sales Tax Fund 1180, came under the Thurston County Public Health and Social Services in late 2017. As you know, treatment sales tax is a 1/10 of 1% sales tax that the Board of County Commissioners approved in Thurston County in 2008. By statute, this fund is intended to provide for new and expanded chemical dependency and mental health treatment programs and services, and for the operation of therapeutic court programs and services. And with that, I will pass it over to Carrie to lead us through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Carrie Hennon, Public Health and Social Services. I'm the Treatment Sales Tax Program Manager. Let's see, how do I drive this? There we go. So as Shelley said, TST is a 0.1% sales tax. It is a restricted fund for treatment courts, mental health and substance use disorder treatment and related services. And just to give a sense of the size of the fund, in 2019, both our revenues and expenditures were about $6.4 million. We are, as we've noted, joined by several members of the TST Advisory Committee today. So I am just the spokesperson and the staff person for that illustrious, expert, devoted group, 9 members appointed by the county commissioners. As you know, that group is appointed to make a non-binding recommendation to all of you regarding the use of TST funds. This group, I think one of the attachments I sent included brief bios of all the committee members, really amazing range of background, expertise, knowledge that this group has brought to the table. I looked at my calendar the other day. We have met 11 times so far in 2020 for well over 30 hours. They've probably done equally as much homework, reviewing proposals, reviewing data, et cetera. So this is the product of a lot of work by a lot of really knowledgeable people. So thank you, committee members. Okay, so as you know, TST is administered and managed through Public Health and Social Services, but touches many offices and departments. So you have heard little previews as you've gone through your budget presentations over the past couple weeks, because many other offices and departments receive, use, and are requesting treatment sales tax funding. So this table shows how that's broken down across the county. There's a column showing actual expenditures last year, 2019. The middle column shows our current budgeted amount in 2020. And then the column on the right is what is being requested in the 2021 budget. A couple things to note on here. The public health, the second to last row of the table, also includes money that we pass along to the Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization, BHASO. That is a significant amount of funding that in 2020, that's about $2.5 million. So if they were a county office or department, they would actually be the largest single recipient and user of TST funding. So you'll see, as I said, in 2019, $6.4 million in expenditures. In 2020, our budgeted amount is quite a bit more than that. There's a few reasons for that. One, we added a couple significant programs in 2020. Most notably, we're spending quite a bit more on in-jail mental health treatment. That is running through our BHO. That made up for the loss of some funding. The BHO lost some funding in 2020 that used to be used for that service. There was an addition of an FTE under Juvenile Court in 2020. And then that $7.6 million is a budgeted amount, not our actual expenditure amount. I do anticipate we will spend less than that. And then, as you can see, that final column, there's almost $9.2 million in requests for TST funding. So lots of needs for behavioral health services in our community. Of that $9.2 million, about $7.8 million is to continue existing programs, and that includes interfund allocations that are charged to TST. The county has done a lot of work over the past couple of years on making sure an appropriate share of the indirect costs, interfund costs, are billed to this fund source. So, continuing with the numbers, this part gets a little bit in the weeds, but I think important. So I've shown this as kind of two different tables. On the top is what is being requested from TST and what would happen to the fund if the board were to approve all of the currently requested expenditures. And then on the bottom is the recommendation that's coming from the committee. So taking this table at the top. So the estimated beginning fund balance at the beginning of 2021. So about $5.1 million. So TST has a lot of money in fund balance. There's been years of better than expected revenues and less than expected spending. So there has been a significant balance built up in this fund. That $5.1 million makes a couple assumptions. It assumes that we have some underspending this year in 2020. About 9 or 10% of our budget, I think, will not be spent. It also assumes that our revenue in 2020 is the same as it was in 2019. We had several conversations earlier in the year about, and I know this tracks your broader conversations about other county revenue, but about whether revenue would really decline with the state of the economy, et cetera. As of right now, we are actually slightly up for this year. Commissioner Edwards asked a couple days ago when Shelley was presenting where we are year to date. I do have an answer to that now. So revenue year to date in TST is $3.75 million. A year ago at this time, we were at $3.58 million. So we're up about 4.5%. So the assumption that I'm embedding in where will we start 2021 is that revenue for 2020 is flat with 2019. The projected revenue in 2021 is, this comes from Questica. This is basically also pretty much flat with 2019 and 2020. And then again, focusing on this first table, the requested expenditures of $9.2 million, that's quite a bit more than revenue. So if the board were to approve everything, spend all of that, we would spend $2.7 million out of our fund balance. The ending fund balance at the end of next year, at the end of 2021, would be this $2.38 million. So we have a healthy fund balance, but the word is kind of out on that. So lots of offices and departments are asking for lots of TST funds. So that would exhaust the fund balance pretty aggressively. That would leave us basically in 1 year at our 3 months worth of cash flow on hand. I think the conversations I've had with Robin, the conversations I've had with the committee are that that's probably a little bit too aggressive. That would, spend all our money right now and then we'd fall off quite a cliff in a year. The recommended level of funding in the next table would, instead of spending that full $9.2 million, the total amount in this recommendation I'm about to present to you is $8.2 million. So that spends the fund balance down still aggressively, but it's sustainable for at least a little bit longer. So that, if you sort of then project that out for a couple of years, that brings us down to 3 months worth of spending on hand at the end of 2022 instead of at the end of 2021. And then obviously, as you know, the board is only adopting a 1-year budget. So there's an opportunity to sort of re-examine all of those things in a year when setting that 2022 budget. So I think the kind of takeaway from this slide is, so that $8.2 million, again, I still think that's an aggressive spending approach. I also think it's reasonable. I think spending more than that would personally make me nervous. I think this kind of strikes a balance between, hey, we need to spend down this fund, and this has some relatively optimistic assumptions, namely level funding across 2019, level revenue across 2019, 20, and 21. It still does leave us potentially with a cliff in a couple of years, but we've talked for several years about the need to spend this large fund balance down given the needs in our community. The idea is not just to collect a tax and not spend it. Shall I pause? Any questions on that?
That looks to be no. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Ray.
So I would just note that the board will go through the financial plan before we're done this morning.
Sounds good.
We'll go through the financial plan.
Okay. So next up, challenges. So I would probably title this Challenges and the Types of Considerations that the committee was thinking about in developing this recommendation. So perhaps strange to note as a challenge, but again, this kind of historical pattern of underspending in treatment sales tax has resulted in a significant fund balance. So as we go through this recommendation, you will see attempts to address that by trying to more closely align the budgeted amount with some of the historical spending amounts. And we'll talk about that more as I kind of present these details. The idea being if we can sort of capture and reallocate some of that underspending, then we're able to fund more of the policy level requests. Second, so behavioral health needs of justice involved individuals. I think you've probably heard about from all of the different law and justice partners. That is an ongoing challenge, and this budget does make some new investments to try to address that challenge. The committee did have some discussion about the fund is currently heavily invested in in-jail services and in the treatment courts. So there was some discussion of, are there opportunities here to intervene earlier in as people come in contact with the justice system, so before charge or before booking in the jail. So you will see some of that in this recommendation. And then other areas of importance that the committee had a long discussion about. So many discussions about evidence-based, track record. TST tracks a lot of data, so this recommendation is very much informed by that data. The committee met with all of the offices and departments receiving and requesting TST funding and asked for their thoughts on COVID-19, how that's affecting programs, how that's affecting expenditures, utilization, et cetera. Also had discussion of racial equity with all the programs. And then kind of last, but very much not least, the sort of overall what's kind of central to TST is we fill gaps. We are not the largest funder of the behavioral health system. We are small and mighty. There are a lot of things that Medicaid funding does and does well, and there's things that Medicaid funding can't do. So where can TST sort of have the most impact? So those are some of the kind of things that informed the committee's discussions and this committee recommendation. Continuing on. Okay. So because TST touches many offices and departments, I will now present each office and department that receives and requested TST funding. The other presentations that you have heard to date, of course, focused only on policy level budget proposals. In this presentation, I'm going through, hopefully efficiently, both the policy level proposals as well as giving you a little context on the kind of maintenance level existing TST funded programs. The committee did review everything sort of as a blank slate. So should existing programs continue to receive funding? And in some cases, and we'll get to an example fairly quickly, there are recommendations back to that point about kind of historical underspending. So there may not be change requests associated with these, but there are still recommendations about the maintenance level, making adjustments to maintenance level funding. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so diving in, Superior Court. So Superior Court has, the way these slides are set up, the top half is existing TST funded programs. The bottom half is the policy level requests from a given office and department. So Superior Court has 3 existing TST funded programs: DUI Drug Court, Family Recovery Court, Domestic Violence Case Coordinator. So the recommendation, sure, yeah.
Before you launch into this, because this seems really important, I want to make sure that I have what everybody else has. I don't have really anything in my binder, and I want to make notes on the right places for what Robin needs and what the other commissioners are going to be doing, whether it's the long sheets that we usually make notes on, or it's these copies of these slides as you go through them, and I can make notes there, but I don't have anything. So I'm wondering what the other commissioners have and what Robin wants us to have.
Commissioner, you don't have a copy of we put something on your desk this morning. I apologize if you didn't get it, which includes the PowerPoint presentation, the 10-year financial plan. No?
No, I didn't. I have the 10-year financial plan in my binder, the small version.
No, it's
I
a
didn't
brand
get it
new.
on
It's
my
a brand
desk.
new copy, so I apologize. Let me make sure that we get copies right away for you.
Thank you.
While we're taking a quick break, or interruption rather, the sheet, Robin, that we used a couple of days ago, is this the only sheet we're going to be rating high, medium, or low on this presentation? Or is there an additional?
So I was just looking for that, Commissioner. That's why I've been off camera and stepped away from my desk. We're going to get you a rating sheet pretty quickly.
Okay, will it be but that will be in addition to this that we did on the 14th.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good, thanks, Ty, for bringing that up.
Shall I keep talking?
So keep going on. Continue. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Superior Court, 3 existing TST funded programs. So here the recommendation from the committee is, so for one of those programs, there's a portion of a domestic violence position funded by TST. That's the portion that specifically relates to mental health and individuals with mental health and substance use disorders. Recommendation there is to continue status quo maintenance level funding. For the other 2 programs, our treatment courts operated by Superior Court, DUI Drug Court, and Family Recovery Court, there was considerable underspending in those programs in 2019. Both of those programs underspent their budgets by about 20%. And there were some good one-time explanations for that. But in kind of further discussion and reviewing the details of those budgets, it does appear that there's opportunity to readjust those budgets at least slightly. So in both cases, these represent a 5% reduction to those budgets, DUI Drug Court, Family Recovery Court. In neither case is that intended to affect service level. Looking at the budget, it appears we can take that out of professional services without impacting services provided. It really is just adjusting down toward actual expenditures. So that would be a reduction of about $31,000 for drug court, $10,000 for Family Recovery Court. So in this case, I don't know exactly what's on the big sheet that Robin's preparing for you. For these types of items, there will not be a change request here. This is the office has not made this request. This recommendation is coming from the committee. A change request, should the board want to pursue this, a change request could be generated, but it won't be on your, I don't think it'll be on your sheet. Okay, continuing forward with the policy level proposals from Superior Court, there were 2. One, first being to add a heart strides component, so therapeutic riding for Family Recovery Court participants. That one was recommended for funding by the committee. The second was for a Safe Babies Court. This is to extend Superior Court is receiving an external grant to launch a specific dependency court program for children age 0 to 3. This is for continued funding for the last few months of 2021 when that external grant runs out, and that was not recommended for funding by the committee. And I think one of the concerns there was kind of the ongoing price tag of that request. So that though it looks like a very small amount in 2021, it's only a quarter of a year worth of funding. And again, there were not enough resources to fund every request. So it's not that the committee did not see merit in all of the requests. It really was just a prioritization process. Moving on from Superior Court to District Court. So District Court has 2 existing TST funded programs, no recommendation for any change in funding to Mental Health Veterans Court or to the TST funded specialized probation caseload. And then there were 2 policy level requests from district court, one to expand that specialized probation caseload, and one for a mental health veterans court additional care coordinator. Neither of those proposals, policy level requests, are being recommended for funding by the committee. And again, there simply weren't enough resources to recommend funding everything, and those just weren't prioritized by the committee in comparison to some of the other requests. Moving on to juvenile court. So juvenile court, TST currently funds the Juvenile Justice Behavioral Health Alternative and equine assisted youth peer support. That's commonly referred to as Heart Strides, the organization that operates that program. The recommendation from the committee is continued funding for those programs. For JABA, the first program, in mid-2020, the board did approve an expansion of that program, added an FTE using TST funds to that program. That is embedded in the continued maintenance level funding recommendation here. And then there were no additional requests from juvenile court. Prosecuting attorney's office provides, participates in all of our treatment courts. They screen cases for entry into treatment courts, and then they're a core member of the treatment court team. The current budgeted level for TST is about $421,000. In 2019, the prosecutor's office spent $371,000 in TST funding. So the recommendation here was to make, again, this slight decrease down to $400,000. So again, the 2019 actual spending was $371,000. So the recommendation here is to set the budget at $400,000 in TST funding for the prosecutor's office. All of these maintenance level changes maybe look small in isolation, but in total they add up to $220,000, which does then obviously free up resources to fund some actual new programming. So that's really the rationale there, was to sort of look at actual spending levels, try to kind of trim a little bit here, a little bit there, not meaning to decrease services, but just meaning to free up that budget authority to reallocate toward new policy level proposals. Sheriff's Office. So the Sheriff's Office operates several TST funded programs. And again, this first item is another similar recommendation on maintenance level, a slight decrease on maintenance level spending. So TST funds a lieutenant position who coordinates all the TST funded services in the jail. So the recommendation here, the budget request for that lieutenant position is $183,000. The actual spending amount in 2019 was about 2018, 136,000, 2019, 141,000. So the recommendation here was to fund about 80% of this FTE using TST funds and bring it down to $150,000. This is one of the few places where a change in the maintenance level budget would actually affect an FTE that would then obviously need to be, instead of just trimming sort of professional services, et cetera. So that would obviously need to be accounted for budgeting for the rest of that FTE. I think it does really bring in more, it's more accurately budgeted in that this lieutenant position has always coded time to other fund sources. It's all been budgeted in TST, but then has always coded time to other fund sources. So again, it's just this attempt to kind of align with the actual expenditure level. Mr. Hutchings, shall I pause? Yes.
I know I have a ton of questions. I'm sure my teammates have a ton of questions, but this is kind of a convoluted and I don't want to miss it. So I'm going to ask it now. Regarding that, what you just described, decreasing the maintenance level for the corrections coordinator, and maybe this is a question for Robin. Does that mean if this is approved, the sheriff's can ask for more money for that position then? For costs, if we're decreasing TST support?
Do you want me to take that or Robin? I think the answer is yes, and I think that is money they would have spent anyway. It's just budgeting for it so there's always been a process where this lieutenant is default charged to TST, but codes the portion of non-TST eligible time to another fund source, presumably general fund, I don't know. That has happened consistently over the past several years. That will happen again this year. So this would just be, I don't think it would change their actual spending in the general fund. It would just put the budget in the general fund. So this one may be trickier, I understand, than just, oh, hey, trim $30,000 out of professional services here or $15,000 there.
That's what I'm asking now, because it's very convoluted when it comes to the budget. And I don't remember seeing this with the sheriff's office yet, that request.
So again, these requests on maintenance level funding, the offices and departments are not, with one exception, are not asking for this. This is coming from the committee in an attempt in saying, hey, we have limited resources. Instead of funding everyone at maintenance level, can we trim back, find some underspending to fund more policy level proposals? So you would not have heard about these from the offices and departments because they did not ask for these.
Well, the advisory committee, I give them complete credibility. They know what they're doing. So, Robin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
I'm so sorry, Commissioner. I'm working on something else.
Okay.
Okay, because
Well, then go ahead,
the
Gary.
numbers don't match. Here, these numbers don't match.
Hang on, Gary.
Just had-
The commissioner's not muted.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Gary.
Okay. The remaining existing sheriff's office TST funded programs, there's no recommendation for a change in the current funding levels. And then there was a request, one policy level request for the sheriff's office that is recommended for funding by the committee. The request is modest, $6,000. And this would fund mental health medications for jail inmates. So jail inmates are currently charged for their health services and their medications. This would not be all psych meds for all inmates, but this would be adequate to cover the medications for folks who are involved in a competency restoration process, with the hope that you're removing that barrier of cost for those individuals. If they're in a competency restoration process, they're not able to afford their meds. That can obviously have implications for restoring their competency, maintaining their competency, and allowing them to continue through their legal process. So the recommendation from the committee is to fund that modest request for a sort of small universe of individuals who need psych meds while in jail. Public defense, here's another slightly convoluted one. So public defense currently receives TST funding for their work in the treatment courts and advocating for clients' entry into treatment courts. TST also funds a portion of a contract that public defense holds with a contracted provider who does mitigation work. So I think TST funds maybe half of that total contract, again, where there are clear mental health and substance use disorder issues. So these, in this case, the existing program and the policy level request are linked. The department asked for a social worker position, and in the discussions that the committee had with offices and departments this summer, the committee asked Patrick O'Connor, hey, if the social worker position was funded, is there a chance that that could absorb some of this mitigation work? So would the would you prioritize could TST fund the social work FTE and therefore not fund what has been funded for mitigation? And are there potential efficiencies there? I'm sure on the department side, the devil is in the details, but at the time, Patrick did say, yes, that might be workable. So that is the recommendation from the committee. So take out this $42,000 in professional services funding and move that over and add more to fund a full social worker position in public defense.
So that's the 99,000 coming up.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, pretrial services. So TST has funded since 2019 a diversion position within pretrial services. Again, very clear link to treatment, only eligible if there are mental health and substance use needs, and it's kind of all about the connection to treatment. There was a request for 2 additional FTEs to expand diversion to pre-charge. This was something that really did resonate with the committee back on that topic of, so TST is heavily invested in jail and in treatment courts, but are there opportunities to intervene earlier? So the idea of creating something pre-charge. So this resonated with the committee. The recommendation is to fund this. Due to limited resources, as we were kind of playing with our totals, the recommendation was to fund 1.5 positions. The request was for 2 positions. The recommendation was to fund 1.5 positions. Half positions are obviously not ideal. I did have a conversation with Marianne Clear about, could that be workable? And she said, more capacity is better than less capacity. So 1.5 is better than 1. Okay, public health and social services. So we get 2 slides here because there's a lot of programming and requests. So for the existing TST funded programs, which are on this page, so TST administration and community grants, that's the kind of area of the budget that has me, the currently vacant data analyst position. There's quite a bit of funding for some travel and training in that budget, and the TST community grants that are RFP'd out to the community. I have had some underspending in that budget. So this is another one of those, hey, we could probably trim a little bit out of that budget with no impact on actual service levels. So decrease the recommendation from the committee, decrease funding there, kind of lining up with historical underspending. Nurse family partnership, no recommendation, no change to existing maintenance levels.
What is that maintenance level, Carrie? I don't have that other sheet. They took it back from me.
So for nurse family partnership?
Yes.
So of course you would ask about one that is extraordinarily complicated, but the maintenance level is $632,115, but this is where the complicated part shows up. As I mentioned before, the county has done a lot of work to ensure that indirect costs and interfund costs are appropriately allocated to TST. Usually I can drill that down to the program level. In the case of public health and social services, most of the indirect costs are sitting in my budget right now. Is Marcia on this call? I can't necessarily tell you why, but my budget, the TST admin and community grants budget, looks very big because it has right now the NFP indirect costs are sitting in there and the veterans case manager indirect costs are sitting in there. So, and I think that is close to $200,000. So roughly.
Is that by any chance for office space and heating and vehicles or something like that?
All of those things, and admin support within PHSS. The interfund charges from Central Services to PHSS. Robin or Shelley, if you want to help me out here, it's all the things. Yes, all of those things.
Okay, I guess just for my seatmates, I don't know if they're struggling with the same thing, because I can't compare costs and stuff. It'd sure be helpful to know what that amount is on as we're going along. I'm not asking you to revise things now, but it just kind of helps. And they took my sheet away, and I don't know why.
So even if you
it
had
wasn't ready, maybe.
That's correct. And even
okay.
if you had your sheet, Commissioner, you would not have been able to see this. It's not a discrete budget change.
Okay.
What this presentation is telling you is you're already spending a certain amount, and they would like you to continue spending that amount with slight changes. But
okay.
that did not show up as a change request. So
okay, I guess I'd kind of like to know the amount we're spending as we're going along. But
I understand that, and I apologize that this is confusing.
yeah, okay.
Okay, within PHSS, the last currently funded TST program is the Veterans Case Manager program. So TST funds a portion of an FTE, about 0.2 or 0.25 of that FTE. That individual screens veterans who are booked in the jail, who may have mental health or substance use disorder needs to connect to services. There is underspending in that budget that is actually not allocated to the FTE. There was about $18,000 in underspending last year that sat in a professional services line. That will also be underspent this year. So the recommendation is to trim that amount. It is not needed to support the FTE, and there's no anticipated impact on services there.
I know we had some discussion earlier about doing something different with the Veterans Fund, and that's how come I'm going to bug you a little bit here about what are we doing on veterans? How much are we spending out of TST on Veterans Fund now then? Just because I'm wondering, we were talking about using another fund to help veterans, and maybe that would take a little bit of the burden off of TST if we were to do that, but I don't recall what all those numbers were before, so I don't know if it's worth messing with or not, because I don't know what is actually spent here on veterans.
So it's not a lot, but obviously, any shift helps one fund and has an impact on another. So you could discuss those things. The TST investment in this Veterans Case Manager, including the indirects, is roughly $50,000.
Okay.
With this, if this downward adjustment were implemented, then that would be 50 minus 15 or 35,000.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Roughly speaking, yeah.
Yeah, something to add, Robin? Oh, okay. All right, go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, Public Health and Social Services had a number of policy level requests. So shifting to those, the first, it was actually your one and only requested decrease in funding. And this is the recommendation from the committee is to approve that decrease. So 2 years ago, the county commissioners allocated $70,000 in TST funding to support Initiative 2 of the county strategic plan. Some of that funding we've been able to spend. Some of that funding we haven't been spending, or we think we can find other fund sources for. So again, to kind of free up other resources, the request here was to decrease that $70,000 by $50,000. So retaining a little bit of that, but giving some of that back.
Terry, what is initiative 2?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Community health and community safety. So it includes things like, oh, Shelley unmuted. She's ready. Go ahead.
Improve community health, wellness, and safety. And this particular initiative focus for the board 2 years ago was on increasing the availability of naloxone. And we have been able to identify other grant sources and other free sources of providing naloxone.
Perfect. Thank you for that. That's good information. Okay, press on.
Okay, next policy level request from PHSS is for a community health nurse. So you all are familiar with the Nurse Family Partnership Program. We just talked about budget for that. Wonderful program, serves lots of families in our community, but has very specific entry requirements. It's an evidence-based model, sort of have to follow the details of the model. To enter NFP, only someone who is 28 weeks pregnant or less can enter NFP. So if someone has already delivered their baby or has an infant and needs some of the same types of supports, we don't have a resource to offer them. So this was requested as a resource so providing that nursing support to parents, mothers who would have mental health and substance use issues, but don't fit the NFP criteria. So the request was for a full FTE. Again, limited resources. The recommendation was to fund a half an FTE here. Next program, so Justice Outreach Program, there is an existing TST funded community grant that is set to run out in the middle of 2021 that funds someone who works with individuals leaving jail, individuals involved in the courts, and seeks to connect them to medication-assisted treatment through the Butte Clinic or other providers. The request here was to continue that grant and make it ongoing, and that was not recommended for funding. Again, limited resources. Then there was so on the subject of the community grants have been funded at $250,000 a year for several years. We made a request to increase that by $50,000, so that would bring it up to $300,000. Not recommended for funding, not because there's not great ideas out there in the community, again, due to limited resources. And then
what do we get out of that for that 200,000 or something? What?
250.
What do we get?
So we run a RFP in the community for that. Right now, there are 3 programs that are funded. Because we had a 2-year budget, we wrote 2-year contracts for those programs this time around. The 3 programs that are currently funded there is case management provided at Drexel House, so Catholic Community Services, Drexel House Permanent Supportive Housing Program for veterans. So case management intended to stabilize people who are living there and this connection to behavioral health treatment. There's a position currently funded through Family Support Center of South Sound, working at Pear Blossom Place, kind of similar model. So that's the family shelter working with individuals with behavioral health needs to connect them to treatment. And then this Justice Outreach Program through Capital Recovery Center, working with individuals involved in the justice system to connect them to medication-assisted treatment. That's currently a community grant, and that was the one that was requested for ongoing funding, but it's currently a community grant. So those contracts run through June of 2021. assuming maintenance level funding for community grants at that $250,000 continues, then I will come back to you early in the new year asking the county commissioners for permission to run an RFP, any priorities you would like to identify, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, final policy level request from PHSS was relates to law enforcement assisted diversion. If you have a copy of the PowerPoint I emailed you, I had a typo on the change request, so that is corrected in that red number here. So this is I believe there is a contract offer from the healthcare authority for about $1 million that then requires local match. So the request was to TST for $300,000 in match. So this one generated lots of discussion with the committee. So the recommendation is funding up to $300,000 with some additional caveats, questions, concerns, etc. So those caveats and concerns are, so one, I know that there's been lots of discussion with leads, still kind of details are evolving. When it is clear exactly how that match would be used, the recommendation from the committee is to do a legal review to ensure that that is a legal use of the fund. There, it sounds like, are still a few ideas on the table of how that match would be used. And obviously we all want to use the fund in accordance with the statute. So that was one piece. I think the committee, not that this is easy, but would encourage those involved in lead planning to ensure that any external potential sources of lead of match have been explored. There was discussion of, there's the casinos make small grants to law enforcement. So one of our committee members said, have they explored that? So have we explored all potential external sources of match? There was discussion, the committee asked the lead team, Shelley and others who presented this to the committee, is this ongoing or one time? It was presented as one time, and I think the committee recommendation is kind of with that understanding that this is a one-time recommendation. It's a 1-year budget, so I guess you could argue everything is a one-time recommendation, but sort of highlighting that in this case. And then there were just some additional discussions within the committee about really hoping to see analysis of the impact of this program on racial equity, ensure there's strong law enforcement support. And then because the contract is not signed and executed, if that does not come to pass, this was a large request of TST, this $300,000. The committee kind of worked hard to balance all the other numbers to make room for that. If for some reason the contract is not signed, I think the question was, well, is there an opportunity to reallocate that funding to any of these other policy level requests that the committee wasn't able to find funding for? And then last but not least, the funding that runs through public health and then via interlocal agreement to the Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization. So lots of funding and no recommendations for changes. So finally a straightforward slide. So maintenance level funding for many, many programs. And then there was one policy level request to provide wraparound with intensive services for transition aged youth. Great program. And this was an expensive request, over $300,000, and not recommended for funding. I talked for a long time. There's a lot of TST requests. So just kind of summing it all up from the committee, I think some of your folks you work with weren't so happy about the 1-year budget. I think overall the advisory committee is sort of excited by the prospect of a year budget. I think the group felt like they had some really good discussions internally and with people requesting TST funding, and look forward to revisiting those discussions next year about priorities, about what are the impacts of COVID, what, if anything, is TST's role in advancing racial equity, observations about how siloed our systems are, et cetera. So looking forward to further discussion in the new year. So now that I talked for almost an hour, that's my final slide.
You ready for questions?
Now, hang on. Interesting, you have system silos. I've never seen the word silos spelled out. It looks funny.
Well, on your hard copy, it might be different. Yeah.
All right, we're ready for questions. I'm sure, I know Gary does have questions. I'm going to presume Ty does, and I've got about 6 or so. I'm going to start. We've asked questions throughout. I'm going to just start with Ty, if you're ready to go. Wait, Robin, did you have something to add?
Very sorry to interrupt. So we were scheduled to start emergency services at 10. You are running long, and you do need to have time for questions and to look at the financial plan. So I would like to recommend that I contact Kurt and ask him to start at 10:30, and just was.
Okay. That's fine.
I think he just heard you.
Okay.
Very good. Is that okay, Kurt?
Hey,
Good.
Kurt, are you there?
Yeah, he'll give a thumbs up.
All right.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So Ty, are
I'll
you
be
ready?
brief. Yeah,
ready
I'll
for
just be
questions?
brief. A comment, Carrie, you're giving Public Works a run for their money as in the most dense and complex presentation. So congratulations.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
Hey, Kara, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yep.
Thank you.
I just want to say, especially since we have community members on here, I really, really appreciate the effort of the committee to look at the maintenance level of the programs, to make sure that, and to appropriately wring extra resources out of this funding source so we can do more with it. That's really helpful to us. And the only real question I had is that why, I have to think about a lot of what you've said, but in terms of a question, I've never understood that allocation of money for strategic initiative 2. Why is it framed that way? And that's a vague strategic initiative. Is there a history there, or a reason why that money, rather than just saying this is money for medication assisted treatment? Is there something I'm not understanding about that, since you're proposing to reduce it?
So 2 years ago, and Robin may want to speak, when the strategic plan had just been adopted, the board, I believe, asked for different teams, interdepartmental, interdisciplinary teams, to come together to talk about some or all of the strategic initiatives. So I think public health was tasked with leading a team to talk about initiative 2, talking to the courts, talking to mostly the courts, public defense, others about, and the task at the beginning was, in theory, hey, if you had $100,000 in general fund, what would you do to support initiative 2? That was presented to the board, and the board said, well, instead of $100,000 in general fund, here's $70,000 in TST. It was partly medication assisted treatment. There were also some training goals identified, some data analysis identified. That's where it came from. We haven't spent all that money, and I think there is room still in that TST admin budget to advance the general goals that we're talking about. So does that help?
I think so. I'm going to cede to my seatmates who I think have a lot more questions than I do.
Okay.
Go ahead, Gary. Go ahead and get 2 of them in, and then I'll try to get a couple in because we're still limited on time. Okay.
I guess starting from where we ended and working our way back, under, it doesn't have a page, under PHSS recommendations, TMBHASO is the acronym, I take it. Anyway, you've got a whole list there. What's the dollar amount for that? It says continue maintenance level funding. And what level funding is that for all those issues?
$2.5 million.
2.5 million. Do you have that broke out as far as, youth outpatient treatment, what's allocated and what's spent? I mean, are we going to get a chance to see Nisqually Jail pretrial release and reentry, Juvenile Court and detention transitions, different things like that? I mean, I'm kind of curious when we're talking about that much money, if there isn't the possibility of some savings in there, or what the ending fund balance ends up being, what percentage you get back out of that amount of money.
So, yes, I have all of that broken out. Maybe that's something I should have shared.
We would be here for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
When the committee went through and did this recommendation, it was at the detailed program level. We had a spreadsheet with a row for every existing program, every policy level request. I have a pretty clean copy of that I would be happy to share.
Okay.
I was, sort of trying to focus on the amounts for the policy level proposals, but I understand how that's good context. Specifically on the BHO or the BHASO, $2.5 million, they do tend to spend pretty much all their money. So whereas we have underspending.
Any matrix for an outcome as far as a success or not? Or if we didn't do this, it'd cost us, 10 times that? Or is there any analysis of the expenditure being effective?
So, I'd say that's part of so TST gathers data on every program, lots of data. We do have that rolled up on a dashboard with kind of every quarter what each program is doing. And to some extent, that is, I'd say, why the committee exists, because that's, and why my role exists is to review all of that and try to make sense of what are we getting when we spend all this money.
And does the committee feel like they're getting proper answers? I guess that'd be it for that.
I hope so.
Okay.
They're here. I don't know if we really want to open it up at this point.
No, I'm just wondering about that. That's all.
I think, so specifically on those programs, we had a lot of discussion and a lot of, I won't say disagreement, what shall I say? A diverse range of opinions on a lot of programs, but actually the area of consensus was when we did our sort of initial scoring sheets, there was almost no disagreement on the BHO funded programs. Almost everyone said, yes, let's continue funding those programs as they exist. We had kind of all over the map on lots of other programs, but those programs were the ones where everyone said, yeah, those things make sense. Those are our most treatment focused programs. A lot of the other TST funded program, our court involvement or connecting people to treatment, et cetera. These are the most kind of actual treatment type programs.
Okay, if we go to page 12 on your recommendation for partial funding for 1.5 FTEs, I suppose there's the same kind of analysis that goes on there. We're trying to keep people out of jail, and that keeps costs down, and all that is part of the process of their decision, I take it, right?
Yeah, again, it's this concept of people involved in the justice system at all stages have behavioral health needs. Do we have the right systems in place to meet those needs? We do have a lot in the jail. We have a very robust portfolio of treatment court programs. So this is that question of, and you hear Prosecutor Thunheim talk often about off-ramps. So where are the off-ramps, and do we have enough off-ramps earlier in the process? And I think this pre-charge diversion kind of gets to that idea. So earlier in the process, is there an opportunity to divert to treatment rather than to deeper justice involvement?
Yeah, and then on like page 4, under your 2021 recommended expenditures, 8.2 million. And that is that taken into account, like you made some reductions on page 3 from the prosecuting attorney of, 21,000 or something. So did we figure that? Is that already figured in there?
Yes, so
Okay.
the total of everything I said is that $8.2 million. So if the board were to say, hey, we don't want to take those reductions, then to
Okay.
stay with that 8.2 million, you wouldn't be able to fund all the good new stuff as well.
Okay. I do have a question, just one, and then I'm done with Shelley. When you started, Shelley, you said the TST was for new programs, and I wondered what you meant by new programs. Does that mean we have a non-supplanting clause somewhere that we had to keep everything else going, or was that you just said new programs?
No, sir. New and existing programs. I was just referring to the statutory language as to the intent of the TST fund.
So we continued a bunch of other activities prior to this, and this just goes towards new and existing. Is that what you meant? There was no restriction on it as far as supplanting.
There is a non-supplant requirement in the RCW.
There is. I'll look at that later. Okay, thank you very much. That's what I was wondering.
Well, in that time, I've reduced my questions down to, I think, about 3, and then just a couple comments. And number 1 is, as I said earlier, I think one of the best things 2 boards ago, or 3 did, was create the advisory committee. They're just a brilliant bunch of people with professional credibility, but also with street credibility, if you look at their bios. So I give a great deference to the advisory committee. So one of my questions is the in-jail versus the pre-arrest investments that we're doing. Does that number include money going to the BHASO? Because they do a lot of in-jail treatment and such. Is that separate?
So yes, there is quite a bit of funding. There's about $1 million going to the sheriff's office for in-jail programs, and then the BHO has roughly $400,000. Well, that's spent in our adult jail. There's also programming in juvenile detention.
Good. Okay. So that doesn't include the in-jail funding. Doesn't include the BHASO. They get separate money to do in-jail stuff.
On that first table showing by office and department, that's really who administers the funding as opposed to where do the services take place. So everything the sheriff's office has does occur in the jail. Some of the money that the BHO has does result in jail services. That helps.
It does. On page 6, you talk about the safe babies, and it's not recommended by the advisory committee. And as you said, we're kind of like sticker shock. But didn't the prosecutor ask for money? I think I may have asked this earlier. Did the prosecutor ask for money for safe babies?
The prosecutor did not ask TST, did not have any new policy level proposals of TST.
Okay, I'm glad. So, and I know you weren't here probably for that, but I'm asking.
Superior Court did when you did these presentations over the past couple of weeks, you heard people's general fund or whatever fund requests, and you've already heard kind of previews of these TST requests. So when Pam Hartman-Beyer presented, she did speak to their TST funded requests as well. So you may have heard from her about that. I don't think there was anything from the prosecutor.
Okay, maybe, yeah. But let me ask Robin and Romero then, if we already rated whether we're going to approve safe babies or not, high, medium, or low. And if I hear that it's not being recommended, does that change that recommendation then?
It could. So again, your high, medium, lows, that's your initial reaction. And we'll talk about those when you do the budget review in a couple of weeks. And if the now that you've heard this presentation by TST, if that changes your consideration from what it had been prior to this information, then we can change those. You can change all of those. It's going to be a tool to help you as you go through deliberation.
Okay, because when I heard the presentation, I thought, why not? But again, giving complete deference to the advisory committee, if they say not recommended, okay, I can live with that.
And you may decide later, not from TST, but yes, from the general fund. I mean, there's options.
And going back to Commissioner Edwards' initial question, or one of the initial questions, having served on the inaugural advisory committee for TST, they get a tremendous amount of information and research and data, and then they request more that comes back to them as well, so they can make a very informed decision, especially on evidence-based type programs as well. So I think it's very good. On slide 10, you're decreasing treatment court support and the sheriff corrections and others due to traditional or underspending. That goes back 5 years. They're underspent. Why do we just keep that money sitting there? We can use it for other programs or whatever. And on page 10 at the top is, the same thing. TSD, the corrections coordinator, reducing that by 33,500. And again, I'm going to go back to Robin, perhaps. Does that mean we're going to get an ask then to pick up the tab for that decrease in TST funding? We will then.
General fund? Yes, you would.
Okay.
I expect you would.
And my final question at this point is on page 11, and that's public defense. And when I heard public defense looking for social work, I thought, I could grandstand on that. You betcha. But my question is, what will that social work, what will that involve? Is that preparing a client for trial, preparing a client or helping the client for defense? I don't know what the social worker would do. I don't know if Ty has the answer. If you have it, Carrie, what would that social worker be doing?
I think Patrick O'Connor provided a description when he presented his budget related to this request. We can certainly revisit that. As I recall, he certainly presented a good argument, and that you're going to be hearing more where the money will come from, which is from TST.
Okay, and I remember him doing a presentation on it, but that's been more than a day ago. But I think the idea is want to know what they'll be doing. And that's all. Hi, Gavin, go ahead.
Just to answer that, it's not about preparing a client for trial. So it's doing, like, there's a lot of times where you might be able to work out an agreement with the prosecutor's office, but they want to see your client jumping through certain hoops. And a lot of times the lawyers just don't have the knowledge or capacity to get your client, who may have all sorts of challenges of communication and transportation and stuff, to get them into the structures and the appointments and stuff. So it's kind of helping toward a resolution that might work for both sides in the legal case, but it requires some legwork that criminal defense lawyers don't necessarily have the capacity for. That's my understanding of what they would help with. I had a question about the pretrial services. So, and this is for Carrie. I don't know exactly when your committee made its decisions exactly. It sounded like you had some discussions over the summer, and I don't know how late these decisions were made. My question is, when the committee recommended to fund 1.5 FTE out of the 2 that were requested for the pretrial diversion, you tracking me, Carrie? We were told by Marianne, and I think it was pretty late breaking news, and I wondered if your committee had the information that there's like a 600 to 800 felony case backlog. So that is gonna at some point gonna hit the system, and these positions would be good to have in any case. But right now, when we're facing 600 to 800 felony cases flooding our court system and our prosecutor's office and our public defense office, having a pretrial diversion program that's beefed up seemed really smart to me. And I was just wondering if your folks had that and knew that there was that impending backlog when they decided to go 1.5 versus 2.
So I think the number that we heard when we initially heard the request was more in the 300 to 400 range. I did hear either Marianne or Prosecutor Thunheim presenting to you guys sometime in the past week that it's more the 600 to 800 number now. Either way, it's a big number. I don't think the recommendation for 1.5 instead of 2 was, we can only keep 1.5 people busy. It was more about dollars and cents. So it's this whole dance of there's $9.2 million in requests. That's too much. What's the thing you do fund? And, it was more about balancing it as opposed to there's a recognition of a need for that capacity. It was just
like I
about
say, I would
resources.
always want to do pretrial divert, when it's appropriate, but we're in a special time right now where I think we may have to do something like this in a very aggressive way in order to deal with, because the cost to the system of that kind of opening of the floodgates is going to be huge. Anyway, thanks.
I'm going to go back to the public defense piece because I looked it up, and going to pretrial as well. By having a social worker embedded with public defense, it helps address it from a holistic point of view or perspective, the social causes of what got that individual hooked into the criminal justice system to begin with and reduce recidivism. So it's freaking brilliant. I'm sorry, freaking, I said, okay. It's brilliant. It's a great idea. I think it's a very good thing. Thank you. That's it, Ty? Okay, Gary, any other follow-up questions?
No, I think that's going to do it for now. Thank you.
I'm a master at Google. I've got a degree in it.
So I would be happy to share with, I guess, Robin and the budget team to send out as you like. If the context of, how much does each TST funded program, what's the maintenance level, what's the recommendation, it might be sort of easier to look at all in one place. I was trying to follow the prescribed format of the PowerPoint presentation and a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. So sorry if that was harder to follow.
Well, we're all that way. Shape-wise, don't worry about it. I think it's very impactful, and it should be commented or noted that we've got several members of the TST Advisory Committee here today, and I think it's a wonderful thing. And that just shows their professionalism, like I said, and street cred as well. Go ahead, Ty.
I want to make sure that, again, I'll restate how much I appreciate you looking at the different maintenance level requests and whether they needed to be adjusted. And whatever, Robin, obviously those weren't requests that are on our form. So I want the board to consider each of those. However you need to dial that up for our discussion, I would appreciate that, so that we get a chance to consider adopting any or all of those suggestions.
Right. So I will work with Carrie and we'll come up with we'll make sure you get the information in early November when you're considering.
Thank you.
So if you're on the TST Advisory Committee, raise your hand. Okay, it's Wendy, Marilyn, Gina. It's great. You guys are awesome. Priscilla, thank you so much for joining us today.
So before you wrap
Carrie,
up, Commissioner,
before
you wrap up, we do want to flash the financial plan on.
Oh, go ahead, do that. Yeah. Okay, I was
Carrie,
writing
do
it down.
you have it?
Sure. Yes. I was afraid of that.
Jeez.
Okay, I need to minimize all of you. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
That's funny.
with all respect. So, Robin, do you do this? Do I do this? How do you?
I can do this.
Can you zoom the numbers for the view in public? It's difficult to read. There you go.
Okay.
A bit too much, but yeah.
So you see here we're in the 2020 column with a beginning fund balance this year of $5.6 million. The revenue source for this fund is sales taxes, and we're thinking this year will bring in around $6 million. That's a decrease from last year. So in reality, we'll probably bring in closer to 6.4 unless something goes sideways in these last couple of months of the year. Moving down to the expenditures. There you go. Too big now. Because I can't see what year I'm
There
in.
you go. Yeah, that's perfect.
So these two top amounts are salaries and benefits that are paid out of this fund, but you see the big amount, almost 4 million, goes out to the community to provide services. Our staff are also providing services, but a large amount of this goes out. So scroll down a little, Carrie. We're expecting the fund balance this year, if you add a few $100,000 for revenue, that we think we'll get to end the year at just under $5 million. But then you look at the next year, if you were to approve what all of the requests for this budget, we'd have an ending fund balance next year of just over 2 million, and in 2020 you'd be in the red. So the thing about this fund, if you look at past fund balance in prior years, it just kept growing, because the offices and departments do not spend the entire allocation. And this year we need to take a hard look. How much do we really think we're going to spend? I think that's part of this projection. We're going to get closer to spending everything this time, but even this year, there's going to be a hefty reversion. And going forward, we need to start to spend it down, but not at this rate.
I have a question.
So just to,
One at a time. The 3 months that you try to keep in reserve, the 3 months, is that 3.3 million, or what's the 3 month worth?
2.9.
2.9? Okay, thank you. And Gary, you had a question?
so can I just provide a little context on the slides I presented? So what Robin, there's like a friendly amendment on the bottom of this financial plan. When Robin said, we think we'll take in about 6 million this year, based on revenue to date, so that would have been a 5% decrease. Based on revenue to date, what Marcia Boyle and I talked about was, well, what if we actually took in, instead of a 5% decrease, what if we actually took in the same amount this year as we did last year, 6.4 million? So that's this adjusted section down here. So increase due to more optimistic revenue for 2020.
Right.
And that's where you get this, instead of a starting fund balance of 4.7, more like a 5.1.
Right.
And that was me trying to stretch to spend a little more money. But I think it's quite realistic, given that we are actually up year to date, to make that adjustment.
Right. But even with a little more revenue, it's still, you still can't afford everything.
Agreed.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I found the 2.3 million for cash flow needs at the bottom of the page. Gary, did you have a question?
Yes, the 300,000 that went to the LEADS grant program, is that figured in as a continuation then to affect the ending fund balance in future years?
So, I mean, I think the way the financial plan works is not figuring in any specific program so much as that, you know, this is if this 9.1 million, 9.2 million is if everything was funded, and then this number for 2022 is, again, if everything continues
Based on
to be
continuing
funded.
funding on that particular line item then, right?
Based on continuing funding for everything, basically.
And I don't know what the plan was originally. I mean, we got that as a 1-year grant, I thought. So,
It is a 1-year grant.
Are we saying we're gonna keep it going at this same amount of money, or is it just a one-time expenditure? And then that would affect our ending fund balance.
That will
Quite a bit.
definitely affect the ending fund balance. So we can adjust this form if it's proposed as one time. I
I mean, we don't have to make the change
Certainly
now. I
adjust
was
it.
just under the understanding
Right.
it was gonna be a one-time expenditure, that's all.
Right. So the financial plan should reflect that.
Okay.
All right, thank you all very much. We're gonna take a 5-minute break or 6 minutes and let Kurt get set up and reshuffle everything. You guys are amazing, and thank you so much for joining in with us. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the extra time.
We're not leaving the Zoom. We're staying on the same Zoom. So we're just taking a recess.
You know, you might be right, Kurt, though, because when your house is on fire, the most important.
Well, I guess depending on the date, you're right. Stop sharing first. We're going to start introductions.
Okay.
Well, I guess depending on the date, you're right. Stop sharing first. Hey, Kurt. Hey, Kurt.
Well, I guess depending on the date, you're right.
Okay, what is going on? There is an echo.
There's too many people talking at the same time.
There we go. I got the echo out.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all,
No, hang on. Countdown.
3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome back. And it's still October 16th, 2020, and we're continuing on with budget presentations. This is Emergency Services, and we have Kurt Harden and his band of renown from Emergency Services. He's the director, and turning it over to Kurt. You're on.
thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, Robin, Romero, budget staff, and to everybody out there viewing. What I'd like to do is, first of all, I'm Kurt Harden, Director of Emergency Services. I'd like to introduce the folks that are with me, but not only that, they are just the tip of the iceberg, tip of the spear of everybody in emergency services, the rest of the staff who do such a great job every day. And we'll talk a little bit about what everybody does here in a little bit. But first of all, I wanted to start off with, and I'm going to go down the order of my list. We have on the Medic One side, Annalie Drury. She's our basic life support BLS program manager. When you think EMT and Medic One, think Annalie. Ben Miller-Todd, he's our advanced life support ALS program manager. Anything to do with paramedics in Medic One, that's Ben. Joy Miller is our fiscal manager for the department. She makes sure that everything we spend and buy, we have money to cover. And sometimes it's a surprise to her when we buy something, so we try to keep that to a minimum, but she does really well at that. And then Sandy Ecker is here from emergency management. And Sandy's been, I have to say, she's probably got more experience in emergency management than I can even imagine, because she's been in the county for a number of years. And so I appreciate everything Sandy does. She helps herd the cats during disasters. So that's what I have for the emergency services department and my folks here. And again, they're here to answer all the questions I can't. So that'll be pretty quick. They'll be jumping in. And do you want me to just go into the presentation then?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I get the right one. You should see Emergency Services 2020 budget presentation. Does everybody have that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, also, I want to start off by, I think everybody else has talked about this to some extent. This has been, to say the least, a unique year. And not just because of COVID. I mean, COVID has definitely turned everybody's world upside down. But we forgot, or not having forgotten, but we remember that there was an Nisqually flood, there was a wildland fire this summer, there was civil unrest to some extent that we activated for. So you'll see a slide later on, but this has definitely been a unique year for us. And I want to say that all of the staff in emergency services, both emergency management and Medic One, have been on the front lines. We've had Medic One staff going out to long-term care facilities to administer COVID tests. We've had emergency management staff going out and delivering PPE to long-term care facilities and other healthcare facilities out there. So they've been on the front lines dealing with this. And we've also had staff in the initial stages of the isolation and quarantine facility staffing that facility, so we can make sure that people had a place to go if they need to isolate or quarantine. So I just want to sing the praises of the staff because I think they do a great job. And as soon as I figure out how to advance the slides, there we go. Emergency services, you've got the slide in front of you, but one of the things I want to talk about is we're two divisions. We're Medic One, we're emergency management. And for those viewing from the public, I want to tell them know that Medic One is countywide, part of the countywide emergency medical services EMS process or system out there. Essentially, EMS is pre-hospital medical care. When you dial 911 and you have a medical emergency, that's where EMS comes in. And we'll talk more about that as we go through. Medic One has multiple diverse stakeholders, which includes all 12 fire agencies in the county, 2 private ambulance companies, the 2 hospitals, and multiple other stakeholders. And I will tell you that emergency management, the second and the other division, They respond to emergencies and disasters. They work with the Emergency Coordination Center. They work closely with all the jurisdictions within the county during disasters and emergencies because a disaster does not respect political boundaries. And so they've been really busy this year, but this has probably been a busier year for them than normal, but usually they are busy throughout the year with activations and working with other jurisdictions. Here's a snapshot of the budget. And I put this up there to show you a couple of things. One, we have the budget's broken out, but it's different funds. So emergency management is general fund, it's federal funds, and it's a little bit small charitable fund that you'll see a little bit later. Medic One is almost exclusively the property taxes out of the Medic One fund, and it's a restricted fund. The other point I want to make is, while it shows 18 and a quarter FTEs in the, department, there's also what doesn't reflect on here is 120 part-time help FTEs that are county employees. Those other employees provide assistance with instruction, evaluation on the Medic One side, and also patient role models when we do training for ongoing training evaluation program and our initial EMT training. I'm going to start with Medic One here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to go through the slide as we talk. We have 10.45 FTEs here in Medic One for this year. We're going to requesting to maintain the same number of FTEs. But one of the things you're going to see is the personnel costs actually go down, even though we're requesting the same number of FTEs. Two reasons for that. First one is we took one position, reclassified it, and when we reclassified it, it was actually a lower cost. So that's one reason the dollars went down. And then the second reason is that we are not budgeting for as much part-time help. Those 120 part-time FTEs I mentioned, and it's not a total FTE count, but it's just the number of people that are on the books as part-time help. We are anticipating not needing as many next year. One of the reasons, as an example, is CPR training. We're finding out that we're not having as many people across the county wanting to come in and do CPR training because I believe of the COVID restrictions and the concern about gathering more than 10 people in one location. So we're dropping our personnel projections as far as costs go. The Medic One fund has actually two funds. It's an operating fund and it's a reserve fund. And what we generally do is the operating fund, obviously from the description, is making sure there's enough funds in there to cover the budget expenses for that particular fiscal year. And then all the other funds, reserve funds that we use are put in the 1280 fund. Here's a pie chart of the Medic One budget. Just wanted to show you how it's all laid out. Administration is 6%. When you look across, BLS is 14%. And then ER&R fluctuates. This year, it's less than 1%. In 3 years, I want to say 2023, when we start replacing medic units, that will shoot up. And then because medic units are a substantial capital investment. And then the vast majority, 79% is right here with our ALS program, our medic program. So here's some of the challenges that we have or we're facing inside of Medic One. The impacts of national healthcare expenditures on the EMS system. Right now, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services in the federal government has a projection that shows healthcare costs will rise 5.3% over the next 10 years, annually over the next 10 years. And so what that means is our costs are going up. And as we'll show here, and when we get to the 10-year plan, that our revenue doesn't maintain pace with that cost due to the 101% plus new construction. You'll see that our revenue is limited, and therefore we're facing a situation that will come before the board next year regarding resources. Dissemination, prioritization, and implementation of EMS infrastructure over the next 20 years. The EMS Council, and I should have started off by saying Medic One has an EMS Council. It's made up of various stakeholders across the county, representatives, that provides guidance and recommendations not only to Medic One staff, but also to the Board of County Commissioners. And the EMS Council, which meets monthly, set up a subcommittee, and we call it the Comprehensive Plan Committee, to take a look at EMS over the next 20 years and come back with a report on what EMS and what resources are going to be necessary for EMS 20 years from now. The Comprehensive Plan Committee has broken that down into 5-year segments, and they were making some really good work and progress through February this year, and then something called COVID came along, and they haven't been able to meet since February due to the impacts of COVID and also everybody trying to keep up with all the after effects. So we're hoping that Comprehensive Plan Committee will be able to start meeting again and start their work back up in 2021. The limited financial resources, mentioned a little bit about that. With the 101% plus new construction, we average about 2% revenue increase every year. If there's a 5.3% anticipated healthcare increases, you can see real fast that that's a 2.3% difference. And so that's going to be talked about a little bit when we get to the 10-year plan. And then maintaining county services during a pandemic. I will tell you that first and foremost, we want to make sure we ensure the health and safety of the EMS personnel and our first responders. But at the same time, how do we ensure we maintain services out into the people in Thurston County? We've done it through a number of ways already, and we're currently looking at how we can continue to do that and get ahead and be ahead of the pandemic curve. But right now we have surge capacity created through our high probability units, and then also our PPE storage within Medic One. And then the last one I have here is hospital diversion. Our concerns are that during the year, if both hospitals in the community, in Capital Medical Center and Providence St. Pete's, if their emergency departments go on divert. In other words, diversion is they're overwhelmed. They've got people in their waiting room. They got people, patients in hallways on gurneys, and all their emergency room beds are full. They go on divert, and what they're saying is, this may not be the best destination for you because we are so overwhelmed. You may want to consider another emergency department. But when both hospitals go on divert, what that means is we have the potential for patients to be transported outside of county. What's happened is that both hospitals and Medic One have gotten together to create a plan where they call it a round robin. When both emergency departments go on divert, they turn around, and as the crew's coming in, they direct that crew, that patient, to the emergency department that can best support the care of that patient at that point in time. So it's a recognition that we have limited capacity of emergency beds here in the county. But at the same time, it's a system that helps conserve our resources, gets the patient to the right care, and also at the same time avoids transporting patients out of county.
Could I add just one comment on that particular item? Commissioners, just probably 2-3 months ago, there were some issues in terms of diversion from emergency rooms here in the county. And as Kurt explained, the two hospitals are on the same page and moving forward with a consolidated plan and approach. This is really a reflection of how Kurt has managed to bring those two hospitals together to continue to provide those services to the county. So I'd just like to plug that in because I know how hard Kurt has worked on that in the last 2-3 months. So kudos to you, Kurt.
Okay, thank you. And I will tell you also that you're talking to some of the staff that are here and not here, but also worked hard on that. Ben Miller, Todd, Annalie Drury, and our medical program director, Dr. Fontanella, worked hard on making that happen as well. So, because I don't get the phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. Ben and Annalie get the phone calls from the EMS crews at 2 o'clock in the morning when there's a problem. But they've done a great job with that as well. The policy level proposals, what we have in front of you is the policy level proposal. First one is, and I know I'm from Florida, so I remember the priorities 1 and 1. I don't know how to go 1, 2, 3, 4, so just bear with me. But the first policy level proposal is a placeholder for a ballot measure. As I mentioned earlier, the EMS Council is considering making a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for a ballot measure in 2021. This is just a placeholder for the cost of that election. We've talked with the auditor's office on how that cost will break out. They've told us it's hard to determine now, but they gave us an estimate. But it also, as you all know, it's a matter of how many ballot measures are in that particular election. So that's just simply a placeholder. The second one is medical and revenue adjustments. That's essentially transferring funds from one of our from the operating fund to the reserve fund or vice versa to ensure that we have sufficient operating capital for the budget. Any questions on these two policy proposals?
The one you just mentioned, the revenue adjusting, is that just a technical type thing, Robin or Kurt? A technical adjustment?
It's my understanding is it's a technical adjustment just to make sure we balance the funds out so we have sufficient funds for the operating fund to make sure we when we write a check we can cash it. And I know I oversimplify, Robin.
And that's not the reserve piece. That's the other one, number 5.
We're bringing down the it actually is going, I think, from the operating fund to the reserve because we won't need as much funds in the operating account next year. And so I think, Joy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're moving it from operating to reserve. Is that correct?
This one is from the reserve to the operating fund. Yeah, so it's reverse.
Thanks, Joy.
You're welcome.
And this is to avoid making those transfers during the year.
Right.
Because
Yes.
we have done that in the past, you might as well just go ahead and do the transfer at the beginning.
We didn't need as much of a transfer for operating funds for 2021 as we did in 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
And I noticed that. Thank you.
Instructions, did that answer?
That does, yes. Good, thank you.
All right, I'll move on to the graph. This displays visually what I talked about earlier, which is blue line revenue coming in. It's fairly consistent. And then the budget amount, and this is from 2008, the budget as it goes up and down, overall, since 2008, the budget has been about a 5% increase a year. And if you notice, sometimes there's a dip and sometimes there's a hill, but pretty much it's an average of about 5% a year increase in the budget. Okay, the Advanced Life Support or ALS program policy level proposals. What we're doing for this one is this is the Advanced Life Support $243,200 increase. And I will tell you that that increase is mostly due to, not mostly, let me get back to there we go. It's due to the ALS policy contracts have gone up about 5.7% from this year to next year. It's about $500,000, give or take. And so what you're reflecting here is also decreases in the ALS program. The areas where we've decreased is in the place of extra help, and I talked a little bit about that earlier. We don't need as much extra help. Travel, it's gone down. And also, we've decreased the cost and the need for insurance because we found that over the last several years, the amount of money we have left over in our insurance line is about $10,000. So we've reduced that because if we're not going to spend it, we probably don't need it in the budget. And then reduction in medical supplies, medications, tools, some of the maintenance. We've replaced some of our systems in the past couple of years, some of our medical systems, and the maintenance costs have been lower than anticipated. So we're able to make some savings there. So overall, while we've increased the ALS contracts by $500,000, overall we've decreased other areas of the ALS budget. So all we need is a net increase of $243,000 to cover the ALS contracts. Any questions on this one? Okay. Basic life support, or BLS, which we have for all our EMTs, you're showing a $205,000 reduction in this line item. And that's a reflection, by the way, when I talk about the reductions in both ALS and BLS, this will not have any impact on our stakeholders out in the county. They will not see any reduction in support. What this is doing is this is a reflection of we no longer need as much extra help next year. I mentioned a little bit about that in CPR. In the CPR program, and that's a reflection that people are not going to come out as much for CPR training until potentially we get through the COVID situation. But it also reflects a reduction in travel, reflects a reduction in professional services, advertising, and also some of the maintenance areas that we talked about before. So that is where that reduction is coming in. And again, these are all the areas that were not being reduced necessarily, but where the elements of the BLS program come into play. When you look at all these areas, this is what the Annalise program touches. I'm just going to jump back up real quick. I should have mentioned the same here. These are the areas that the ALS program touches as well. I just wanted to make sure that we could put something tangible to what each of the programs were. So for the administrative area in Medic 1, it's a decrease of $9,750. And that decrease is due to travel, training, some supplies, some small tools. But it's a small reduction, but then keep in mind, it's only 6% of the budget to begin with, but it is a reduction as well. So I'm gonna, before I jump into the emergency management side, I'm gonna ask a question. And if you wanna do the 10-year plans now, or you wanna wait till the end of the emergency management presentation to do the 10-year plans?
Well, let me ask you, is there any questions, commissioners? Questions or comments at this point?
Not yet.
Nothing, Kai?
Nope.
Okay, I'm going to the 10-year plan then, Kurt. Thank you.
10-year plan, okay. What you should see in front of you is the 10-year plan 1290 and 12, well, let me get to the correct one, 1280. So can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the 10-year plan for the 1280. It's the Medic 1 reserve. And this is where essentially funding comes in that we're not going to use during the budget year. And this is where it would come in. What you'll see is the ending fund balance consistently goes down. We're in, and I should have highlighted the yellow to begin with, but here we are in 2020. And this is estimates from here on out, but you'll see that the ending fund balance down here at the bottom is going down until we get to a point, we're transferring more money in. However, when I go to the 1290, one of the things that we're looking at here is in 2020, we're going to have an ending fund balance of $2.9 million. And then in 2021, it drops to 2.3 million. I should mention that we need 2 months of operating expenses in our fund balance at any given time, so that we are able to cover the cost of the expenditures, and that's about $2.3 million, give or take, in any given budget year. So we, at the end of 2021, come down right to where we need to be for our ending fund balance and maintain that 2 months supply or 2 months reserve. So starting in 2022, we end up having to do a significant budget reduction in order to get the ending fund balance back up to the level of $2.3 million. So what we have here, these outlying areas, we know we can't go negative. So we also know that in the outlying projections, we're going to have to end up reducing the budget significantly in 2022 unless there's a change in revenue. And that's already been known. We've been projecting this. For those of you who have been here for a number of years, I know Robin and Ramiro, you've been hearing this for a while. We've known this is coming up. We've known this has been approaching. So basically, this is just something that we're going to have to tackle next year. And like I said, the EMS Council is meeting next week to prepare a formal recommendation. Any questions on the 10-year plan for Medic 1?
Gary?
No, sir.
No. Kai? No. No, Kurt.
Okay. Then we'll go back to the presentation and go to emergency management. So emergency management, I'm going to go through the same process here, but this year, just a little rate FTEs, 8.05. Next year, recommending one of the positions be restructured as a quarter of an FTE. It's currently a half of an FTE. The person in that position is really agreeable with it. He understands it, and I believe wants to work a quarter, 10 hours a week, vice 20 hours a week. The drop in salary, even though we're reducing the FTEs, but at the same time, this is not the same amount of a quarter of an FTE. What you see here in the 2020 personnel costs is COVID-related costs have bumped this up. I don't want to use the word artificially, but have bumped it up because we had a temporary help inside of the ECC during the activation for COVID. And so therefore, those costs are reflected here. And it's being covered by CRF funding And so that funding goes away, and also the personnel costs will go away into 2021. So that's why there's a difference there. Same here with some of the costs in other. It's inflated a little bit because of the expenditures for COVID response that's being covered by CRF, and so that goes away and comes back down in 2021. And then emergency management does have an 1140 fund. There's two elements in the 1140 fund. It's Emergency Management Council is one piece of it, and the other piece is the Homeland Security Region 3 Incident Management Team. They are the other piece of that. And the funds from the Homeland Security Region 3 Incident Management Team are not county funds. And so therefore, they're just, as the lead administrative agency for the Homeland Security Region 3, Thurston County administers those funds, but they're not county funds. There's the pie for emergency management. One of the things I want to point out was over 50% general fund, obviously, but we have a significant amount of federal funds that come up, and 34% of the emergency management budget is federal funds. And so I will tell you that that's broken down into what we call State Homeland Security Program, SHSP. That's $314,401 here. There is no match requirement for that federal grant. It is a 100% federal grant. Then we have $206,000 for emergency management performance grant out of this pie. That requires a 50% match. However, that match is made up, is met by this general fund expenditure in emergency management. So even though we're required to have a $206,000 match by the county, you can obviously see we exceed that because we have a $1 million general fund contribution to emergency management. So there's no issues with that match. And then the third one is Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. That one is $100,000, and that's a 75% federal, 12.5% state, and then the other piece is 12.5% local or Thurston County match. However, that 12.5% local can be what we call a soft match or made up in kind. So we can use staff salaries. We can use any resources within the county that were a part of that or directed towards that funding. And an example would be an open house. If we held an open house for the public as a result of that mitigation grant, those costs would be going towards the county match. So typically in a mitigation grant, we quite often do not see any hard match requirements from the county, and almost always it's made up through what we call a soft match, and we don't have to have any additional resources from the county. Any questions on, and let me talk real quick. This is the hazard, the incident management team in the 1140, the 142,990, and then emergency management council up here is 28,565. Well, with that, I'll go on to the challenges for emergency management. I will tell you, federal funding is a concern, whether or not we lose federal funding, that first bullet. We have reduced. Our federal funding's been reduced for the Emergency Management Performance Grant, as an example, from $158,238 in 2014 to $127,814 in 2020. We don't anticipate any loss of federal funding next year. However, we're concerned in the outlying years because, as everybody has seen, there's been a lot of federal expenditure this year in response to COVID-19, and we're not sure where that's going to be in 2 to 3 years when the federal government starts looking at its deficit situation. The second one, federal or state unfunded mandates. That's always a concern because I will tell you an example. 2 years ago, the state passed a limited English proficiency requirement, and all jurisdictions were required to, during disasters or emergencies, put out information to the public in multiple languages. In Thurston County, because of our demographics, ours is Hispanic, and I want to say Vietnamese. Is that correct, Sandy? Yeah. So, but we didn't receive any funding from the state to make this happen. However, I will tell you, the legislature funded the state agencies that were required to do the same, had the same requirement to do translation services during and different outreach to different demographics during a disaster. They funded those state agencies. So it's kind of an uneven playing field. And I just wanted to, and I will tell you that our cost to do this and we split it with the Homeland Security Region 3, but there was a cost of $30,000 amongst 5 counties in Homeland Security Region 3 to meet the requirements of limited English proficiency. And of that $30,000, you can imagine that a large majority of it, if we had to do it individually, would have been on Thurston County. So just letting you know what the cost is, and we can translate that into direct costs. The next one is new and evolving threats. I will tell you that oil train, if you remember 2 years ago or 3 years ago, oil trains going through communities was a huge issue. I don't think we've heard anything about it since then because we're now so focused on cybersecurity. We're focused on pandemic. We're focused on active shooter. And we don't know what's out there that we don't see. So that's one of our concerns is how do we adapt? I will tell you during the pandemic, we had a game plan for a pandemic. And I will tell you that the framework, the all hazards approach to the pandemic was good as a framework. However, EM staff and public health staff also had to be flexible and adaptable to overcome the obstacles because there were situations we'd never even dreamed of when the pandemic started. And I will tell you that EM staff had to be out there in the front doing those things along with, supporting public health staff and their incident management team. The next bullet, participating in national level exercises. We're in a resource constrained environment right now. And there's a national level exercise, Cascadia Rising 2022, scheduled for the early summer of 2022. That was scheduled prior to the pandemic. Since the pandemic, FEMA has indicated they are going forward with the national level exercise, Cascadia Rising 2022, and they're going to keep the same objectives. They're just going to compress the planning timeframe. And that's a huge concern because in 2016, we had Cascadia Rising 2016, and we were well into the planning phase this far out for Cascadia Rising 2016. We have yet to do any planning for Cascadia Rising 2022 because the state is in the same position as we are. And so that's a concern that we're going to get pulled into a national level exercise and not be adequately prepared for it. And then the last one is maintaining county services during a pandemic. I think this is every department and office out in the county is looking at how do we continue our services. We've been talking about that and since I want to say March, April time. And it's hard when we're essentially, if you want to look at it, we're in a plane, we're going down the runway and we're building the wings as we're going down the runway because the rules keep changing and evolving. And so I would say that I'm hoping by the time we get to the end of the runway, because we're not there yet, we have the wings put together sufficiently that we have a sufficient lift, because otherwise it's going to be a bad day. And I think that's what I feel like is the whole county has been trying to address, and especially within emergency services, how we continue to support the public during this pandemic. I want just to throw up here the ECC activations in 2019 and 2020. And by the way, I'm not saying 2020 is over. I'm not saying we're not going to have any more activations. So I'm not trying to jinx the whole process. But this just shows you that we were busy before the pandemic. And then, and by the way, the Bordeaux wildfire, it started out as Mima Road. I still do not understand the fire service's ability to change names in the middle of a wildland fire response. I don't understand it. They've tried to explain it to me before, and I still don't understand it. But it's now called officially the Bordeaux wildfire, but you might remember it as Mima Road. So this is just an example of emergency management staff and what they do and how busy they are and what they have to plan for. So for sustainment of COVID-19 activities into 2021, we talked a little bit about PPE, and for the people, the viewing public, I mentioned to the commissioners on Wednesday that we got dropped something this week where all the schools and school districts in Thurston County now are going to Thurston County Emergency Management. That was a decision by the state. Previously, the state was resourcing the schools and school districts separately through OSPI, and now that's all coming through us. So that's increased our logistical distribution concerns because we're going to have increase a lot of our PPE pass-through requirements. Just imagine every teacher and every student in Thurston County needing a cloth mask or some type of face covering and needing that multiple times throughout the week. Now, we're fortunate in one respect. They're not teaching, they're not meeting face-to-face, So that gives us a little bit of time to plan and prepare for when they do start meeting face-to-face. Support long-term sustainment planning for isolation and quarantine. We're continuing to support public health as they administer and work on the isolation and quarantine facility. And we're there to support whatever requirements they may need. But we started this back in March, working with public health on this, and we've continued that through today to help support them wherever they need the assistance. Tracking and documenting costs. I will tell you that, and we had a meeting yesterday, Robin was part of that meeting, where the rules and requirements for different programs can trip you up if you're not careful. And an example is COVID funding, what we call CARES Act funding, for lack of a better term. That CRF funding has a certain set of rules. That funding goes away at the end of November. So starting in December, we pick up FEMA, and FEMA rules are a lot different than the CARES Act funding rules. And so we talked about that yesterday, and I think Robin is working to how we can prepare the county to get ready for a new set of rules for COVID reimbursement. And that's going to be a fun process as well, because I've had 20 years of working with FEMA, and I will tell you that the only thing that's consistent about FEMA is their inconsistency. And I can say that because I've worked with them, and I will tell you they privately agree with me. And then the last one, or not, second to last, supporting state and local recovery activities for COVID. There's a number of initiatives out there at the state level. We're very fortunate that Janica Machado is here in the county because she's been able to work in some of those areas and attend some of those meetings at the state level, because I don't believe that goes through emergency management. I think economic recovery is going to have to go through other areas and other parts. And I think Janica has hopefully I think she does, has a good handle on it, and she's very agreeable to work with the state in those areas. So I think that's working well for Thurston County. Coordinating this distribution of masks and other resources. In 2021, if it's similar to 2020, we are going to have to pay particular attention to vulnerable populations, long-term care facilities, food banks, mitigation camps. We're going to have to work closely with public health and public health officer on when there's a situation that occurs, how we can get resources to help mitigate that situation. So I will tell you that the public health officer, Dr. A, has picked up the phone or grabbed me an email and said, hey, we need this much PPE to this location. And we've been able to support that to date, and we want to continue to be able to support that. Policy level proposals for emergency management. First one, our emergency management performance grant. That's a federal grant. We get it every year. We're anticipating this. This is what I would almost call housekeeping. This is going to come in, and we are just anticipating this much coming into our 2021. The policy level 2, Homeland Security Region 3 grant, same situation. We anticipate this coming in. It's more about housekeeping. We know the grant's headed our way, and so it's just a placeholder in there. The third one, hazard mitigation grant program, allowing Thurston County to analyze existing stream gauges. We've applied for a hazard mitigation grant to look at the stream gauges in all the rivers in Thurston County, because some of the gauges are challenged to give us, and give the National Weather Service good, actionable information during winter storms. And so this, we're hoping, will be able to allow us to go in, assess the gauges, and determine whether or not gauges need to be replaced or augmented. And again, this is a federal grant coming in. The item 4, this is just removing the federal grants that we've already expended. This is Homeland Security Region 3 grants, and we anticipate those to be all drawn down by the end of December. And then the last one, I mentioned this, in the Nisqually Indian Charitable and Local Government Fund, we traditionally get a little bit of money from the Nisqually tribe. We're very grateful for that. That goes for our web EOC system. And so that we're anticipating $9,500, give or take. And that concludes the emergency management. I don't know if you want to look at 1140, and also what questions that you might have that I can answer, those on the call can answer.
Gary, any questions?
Yes. Kurt, are you folks looking at the possibility of reusable, washable masks to replace some of your other product?
We actually started looking at recycling masks back in the March or April timeframe, and started a process where we were looking at sanitizing masks. We'd take them up to a facility up at Fort Lewis so they could be sanitized. We were looking at if the mask didn't have any, it wasn't in contact with anything, didn't have any dirt or whatever, it could be reused. So we had a list of guidelines that we were putting in place working with EMS recycling masks. So that is out there, absolutely. And I think it's a conservation of masks. The one thing we don't want to have happen though is have EMS personnel continue conservation of masks if we have a sufficient supply. Because the intent is that while you can recycle the mask with minimal impact, you want to make sure that you have no impact to the patient. So I think right now we are in a situation with EMS that we can put, and we have masks available, so we don't have to do the conservation, but we do have plans in place. We have a process in place that were developed in the spring with the fire agencies to recycle masks.
Even some of the masks that we give out, if we could give them out with 2 individuals, you're talking about homes or what, vulnerable population, with the idea that they get the mask, but it's a washable mask. They can wash their own mask,
Correct,
just
yeah.
soap and water type of a thing.
Yeah, cloth masks, the face coverings that we've given out on the emergency management side for those vulnerable populations. A lot of those, if they're cloth face coverings, they can be washed, and they're designed to be washed so people can reuse them.
Okay, thank you.
Ty, any questions?
Yes. Kurt, going back to your Medic One financial plan, is this projection, is this related then to the item you have about potential ballot measure?
Yes.
Okay. And that's going to be discussed by the EMS Council?
Next week.
Okay. And this fund is mainly, you said, property tax, right?
Correct. It's almost exclusively property tax. There's a little bit of timber tax and some others, but it's mostly property tax.
And this piece of property tax, this falls within the penumbra or the umbrella of our decision of whether to increase the 1% versus the, as Robin can give me the acronym, the IDT or whatever it is that makes it. It says we could only go 0.6 unless we take this additional step to go to 1%. And if we don't do that, that's going to impact Medic One revenue, and it's going to make this financial plan where is it built into this projection that it's assumed that we're going to do that 1% upgrade, or is that built in here somewhere?
Yes, and commissioners will in our next half hour. Looking at the variance between the 1% and the IPD is exactly what we'll talk about.
Okay. And then my other question was about the this Cascadia Rising 2022. I've never heard of this. It's new to me. So what when you say it's a national level exercise, does that mean like the whole, I mean, we're not the only, like every county in Washington would have to participate in this? And is that how it works, or?
How it works is it's a multi-state, and I'm not sure if Canada's involved in this or not. I don't know if it's international at this point, but it's multi-state exercise. So Oregon's participating, Washington's participating. I don't have a list of all the states that are participating, but then it's an opt-in. And so, in other words, counties don't have to participate, jurisdictions don't have to participate, but it's a great opportunity if we're resourced correctly, if we plan it correctly. It's a great opportunity for us to have a exercise that at the federal level, state level, and local level, people are participating. Typically, you have to simulate during exercises either state or federal participation because you don't get everybody into an exercise. So this is a great opportunity to stretch all 3 levels of government. But my concern is having the ability to plan it and prepare it sufficiently.
And do you happen to know if our neighbors are planning to be part of it, like Lewis County or Pierce County?
I can't speak to Lewis. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Sandy might know, but I do know that King and Snohomish are planning on doing that, but also share the same concerns about being adequately prepared for such a large exercise, and concerned about scaling back the planning window.
Terrific. Thank you, Kurt.
Kurt, I don't have a question. I guess more of a comment that I'm surprised, but not surprised that there's been such a decrease in CPR requests for training, because is it because I'm guessing we're saturated, is my presumption. However, instead of CPR, have you heard of QPR?
QPR, okay.
QPR, I'll give you a little bit of history.
Okay.
Scott Hanauer, the former director of Community Youth Services, now works for Family Education Support Services, FESS, and Shelley Willis is the director. So Scott works for her now with this nonprofit, and he is one of the certified QPR instructors. It's for suicide prevention, and it's question, persuade, and refer. And it's not just for youth, but it's aimed at youth. But anybody can be taught this, but it's aimed at saving suicide lives, anybody's. But it's QPR instead of CPR, which is, I mean, they're both life-saving. But when you talk about CPR, I thought, I haven't heard CPR, except maybe I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard CPR in this year, but I can probably about 24 times or more I've heard QPR all around the community. So anyway, just a comment. Like I said, just a comment. But that surprised me, because CPR has been around for so long. But you think with new people coming into the workforce and such, there would still be a demand for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. But great presentation. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you. And
everybody.
For last.
Okay, anything else, Gary?
Nope. Good
Nope.
job.
Nothing else?
Pretty good information there, but I can't hardly believe not more questions, but good job by all, it looks like.
Sandy, Ben, and Anna, thank you all very much. Anna Lee. Do you go by Anna Lee or just Anna? I'll guess. Okay.
Anna Lee, usually.
Okay. And that's it. Anything to wrap? We're going to go into something else now, Robin, or are we ending this piece of it?
So we'll wrap up with emergency services and then go into the final session of the morning, next steps.
All right, good. So thank you all very much for joining us. Have a great rest of the day and a great weekend.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Okay, so give me 5 minutes and then we'll begin.
So we'll take a 5-minute break.
Yep.
Break. Be back in 5 minutes. 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, we're back. And Robin Campbell's going to put a bow on this.
So it has been a long 2 weeks, and it's been chock full of information, and I hope it's been very informative for all of you commissioners. We're going to wrap up today talking about what's coming up for the rest of this year, and then wrap it with a conversation about the levies and trying to answer any questions that you may have about the upcoming levies. So I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna start with the schedule. Screen 1. And I have to move this. Okay, so the thing that's not on this is that we'll need a decision from the board regarding the levy. If you want to go with the IPD at 0.602%, or if you'd like to pass a resolution of substantial need and do the full 1% increase. We'll talk more about that in a moment. That's the thing that is not on this schedule for you, but we need a decision from you by the end of this month on that. So more to come in just a few minutes on that. Here's the calendar for the rest of this year. In early November, you'll reconvene to talk about the budget and make your decisions, and I'm going to call them preliminary decisions, because you won't make final decisions until after the public hearing. But on Thursday, November 5th, Friday, November 6th, Monday, November 9th, and Thursday, November 12th, the majority of your days will be discussing the budget. Now, not every day is from 9 to 4:30, so the time on this schedule is just to check the master calendar. But the majority of these 4 days will be conversations about what you'll fund next year. Then on Friday, November 13th, Friday the 13th, I will be asking you for final decisions on that date. This is a very important date. We have already pushed this schedule out 2 weeks, and we need your final decisions on that day to be able to have the budget team prepare all of the documents in time to publish the preliminary budget in accordance with legal requirements, so that it is available for the public review before we hold the public hearings. So there are very strict rules about when we have to publish the information. 2 weeks prior to the public hearing. So the book goes out, and I'm looking at a calendar. I'm looking for a calendar. When we hold the public hearings on December 7th and 8th, the budget book has to be published absolutely no later than November 23rd. And so if you make final decisions on November 13th, your team's got less than 1 week to put the documents together. So there is no wiggle room. Usually I build in time for a couple extra days, but not this year. So it's very important that we are focused on finishing on November 13th. Yes.
Robin, does that mean November 5, 6, and 9 you will have, your team will come back with all the low, medium, highs, and then we just chew it all up.
You will have all those back. You'll have all your notes back. We'll have all of the information, as much as we can get, that you've asked for. Any questions that you've asked in these meetings, we're working on now to get answers for you. So everything we can answer, we've asked people in offices and departments to be available in case you've got additional questions or would like to have someone come back to talk more about any particular item. We can bring people in, but that's what those days are all about.
Okay.
All right, so we're getting close. Revenue and levies, and again, we'll talk more about those in a moment, but the schedule for your revenue is the public hearing on revenue to support the budget, including a conversation about property taxes, must be held by the end of November by state law. So on Tuesday, November 17th, we would have done it a week earlier if we'd had a IPD above 1%. But on the 17th at 5 o'clock, we'll hold the public hearing on the revenue to support the budget. And then immediately following that, you'll hold the public hearing on the Lake District revenue increases. Then final action on the property tax levies, adopt and certify, is scheduled for November 24th during your regular board meeting. Now we can push that out. Do bear in mind that November 26th is Thanksgiving and 27th is a holiday. You could schedule a meeting to adopt the levy on Monday, November 30th, but that is your last possible day to act if you're going to increase any of the property tax levies, because state law requires action be taken by November 30th, or the most you could collect is last year's levy. So that's a really important date.
Are these dates already populated in our calendars, I would imagine?
I do believe that we have these dates in your calendars, yes.
Thank you.
Then, the public hearings. Again, state law dictates when these hearings happen and to some degree how they are run. And what the law says is that the public hearing on the budget must be on the first Monday in December, and then that it can continue for up to 5 consecutive days. It also requires that the public be able to ask questions and be answered by the elected official or department director who is proposing the budget. So we schedule these in blocks of time so the public knows, okay, if I'm interested in the treasurer's budget, I need to show up on Monday at 4 o'clock if I have questions for Treasurer Gadman. So we hold these hearings over 2 days. We start with Law and Justice on Monday, December 7th at 1:30. So we've got 2 hours for Law and Justice. At 4 to 5, we'll hear General Government. And then in the evening, we will open it up. I'll present an overview and then open it where the public can ask questions about any part of the budget that they wish. We've structured this way to make the most availability to the public. So if they can't come in the afternoon on Monday or Tuesday, then maybe they can come in the evening. It's going to be a little different this year, of course, with Zoom, but we're trying to maximize the opportunities for public participation. So you've got an open comment session on Monday evening. Then on Tuesday afternoon, we pick up again transportation, environment, and land use at 1:30. At 4 o'clock, health and human services and emergency services fit into that. And then Tuesday evening, also an open comment period. So any questions on the public hearings?
Commissioners, if you have, just go ahead and jump in.
Not now.
No, okay.
Yeah, okay. Then, after the public hearings, we've scheduled 2 mornings for you to deliberate if you'd like to make any changes at all based on what you heard at the public hearings. So this is the opportunity for you to make any changes to the preliminary budget that was published. And these are the final decisions on the budget. So you've got Wednesday, December 9th and Thursday, December 10th. And that's almost done. Yes, Commissioner.
Well, I'm looking at December the 8th. It's a Tuesday. And are we going to skip the Board of Health and the BOCC meeting? Because it shows budget deliberation, hold for budget work session from 1:30 for 4 hours.
On
Tuesday the 8th.
Yeah, we'll cancel the meeting, Commissioner.
Okay,
yeah, we'll have to.
thank you.
So then the culmination of all the work you've been doing all year is on Friday, December 18th. We will adopt first the capital facilities plan at 9, and then at 9:30 adopt the budget and all the resolutions that go along with that. So it's kind of anticlimactic by that time because we're just working our way down the resolution list, but
We're numb.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's the schedule. Any questions about the schedule? And I'm going to try to stop scrolling.
I don't. Gary?
Nope.
Okay.
Great. Then we will look at the levy. So, as you've heard me say, the state law allows levy increase by the Board of County Commissioners or any jurisdiction in the property tax. The maximum increase is 1% above the prior year's lawful levy, unless the implicit price deflator, or IPD, which is similar but different than the consumer price index, which is what most people are much more familiar with when we talk about inflation. But if the IPD is less than 1%, you are limited to an increase of the IPD unless, here's the second or, unless the board adopts a resolution of substantial need. And a couple of weeks ago, I gave you an example of what that looks like. It's pretty straightforward. Really, all it has to say is that based on current spending needs and conditions in the county, in order to continue our programs, the Board of County Commissioners finds that there is substantial need to increase the property tax levy by 1%. It's been a few years since we've done that. I think this decade is unique in that we had to do it 3 times in the last 10 years and only once ever before that. So here we go again. This year, the IPD is 0.602%. And what this table shows you, and I'm going to make the table a little bigger, is what is the difference? These are the 4 areas where we collect property tax. And just to make things even more complicated, the property tax that supports the public health and the Veterans Fund is buried in this current expense levy. So you don't see a comparison for those 2 levies, but that's because they are part of the current expense levy.
Robin,
So-
you said the IPD is currently 0.0 what?
0.0602. It's right here on the page.
On your left-hand side, on the left-hand column.
Left hand,
Okay.
the 3rd set of numbers.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
That's what I was looking for.
And I see a spelling error here. Ignore the typos.
Skip the election.
Yeah, it's the complexion. So current levy, and I'm going to work my way down the current expense or general fund column. The current levy is $41,169,457. And our levy rate, or millage rate, as some call it, is $1.16 and a bunch of fraction, cents. So it's $1.16214 per thousand of property value.
Where's that located on this list?
It's on the second level.
Right here. I can't highlight it on this document.
Okay,
The levy
1.16224.
rate.
Right there,
Yeah,
right?
214.
Got it.
That's the current
Okay.
levy rate.
Thank you.
All right. So when I go through all the calculations, and I can certainly walk through them with you if you'd like, but it's kind of complicated. So I'm giving you the not that you're not able to follow along, but here's the bottom line. At 1%, the new levy is $42,353,133. And here's the new levy rate per thousand, 1.04086. At the IPD of 0.602%, the new levy would be $42,189,624, and the levy rate per thousand in property value is 1.03687. Remember, that's roughly $1.04 per thousand in value. And here's the increase. So at 1%, your general fund levy would increase $1,183,676. At the IPD, your levy would increase $1,020,167. And at the bottom line, the difference to the general fund is less revenue if you only go with the IPD of $163,509. That's the difference between those two. So you've got that amount for each of the funds. In the road fund, the difference, if you go with the lower levy, you won't be able to collect $93,683. In Medic 1, the difference is $38,829. And for Conservation Futures, it's $5,716. That is the difference of applying a 1% levy increase compared to a IPD levy increase. Now, I will also say, going back to current expense, and actually in all of these funds, the $1,183,676, part of that is the 1% lift, part of that is from new construction value. And that's why the difference isn't bigger than what it appears to be on this sheet. But I wanted to show you the levy at the bottom line because that's the only way I have of calculating the difference.
So we're going to decide, the board will decide on 1% and then, or the implicit, or the IPD, and then build a budget based on that.
That's exactly right.
So presumably, if we voted to increase it by 1% or IPD and then built the budget, we would approve the budget and vote in favor of the budget that we just built.
You still have to pass the property tax levy unless you're doing no increase at all in the property tax levy. You still have to pass and certify the levy by November 30th.
Okay. Ty, go ahead, Ty.
If we did no increase at all, that would be $1.2 million difference from 1% to, I'm just looking at the collection amount. Is that the number?
Right. If you did not increase the levy whatsoever, the difference, well, you'd have to pick. Would you do the difference between the 1% or the 6? But your levy would be $41,169,000. There's some other choices that I can bring to you, like what if you didn't lift the levy, but you did collect the increase in property tax values? The levy lift is about, in current expense fund, it's about $400,000. So if you didn't lift it at all, no percent increase, but you did collect the increase for new construction and then there's refunds, then you'd be going less by about $400,000.
Less than what?
Less than you would collect if you did a full 1%.
Okay.
Robin, also, correct me if I'm wrong, but the board has options to exercise the 1% on all, including the current expense roads, Medic 1, and Conservation Futures, or separate. Or they can pick and choose which one will be. So it's not all inclusive.
That's right. That's right. And really, you don't even have to go. I've presented what looks like an either or option, but you could go at any amount up to 1%.
Yeah, that is correct.
So you could choose to do 0.5%. It's completely up to you.
Do you know what would help me is Oh, boy, it's just more work for staff.
No, but that's what we need to know. What is it that you need? I'm not looking for a decision today.
Right.
Um,
I tentatively have this item again on Tuesday morning.
Okay.
To continue the
Right.
conversation. If there is any additional information that the commissioners need to continue the conversation, we'll bring that back on Tuesday morning to continue the conversation.
Right, and that's
What
what
I
we
think
need to know is what else?
The public would need to see, because they're gonna look at this 1.16 versus the 1.040 and try to do the math and with the IPD and without, what they would like to see, what I would like to see, something very basic. If my house is $200,000 or $300,000, this is the amount of increase. Not for every scenario, but with just the 1%, what would that increase be in taxes for a $300,000 valued home or a $200,000?
You want to do the median house price in Thurston County? Is that what you're looking for, or
There you go.
specific amounts?
Yes. Now, the median price would be sufficient. Then people can figure that out themselves, what kind of increase that would be. We just heard that after the first of the year, when all the eviction of moratoriums, if they end at the end of the year, how the increase in evictions, not only just renters, but perhaps people with mortgages as well with the pandemic. And I would like to see what that number looks like so people can actually look at it and see what kind of increase it might be. Gary, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. I want to get a little better understanding, and it sounds like we're going to talk about this later, but theoretically, we could invoke the 1% with a statement of need and just apply it to Medic 1, for an example. Just as an example. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or we could do it Medic 1 and the conservation futures.
Correct.
And I guess I would like to have a breakdown if we're going to talk about this at another time, and it sounds like something's coming up Tuesday. I'd like to know the amount of increase relative to the median price, I guess, of a home. So if that home went up $50,000, $100,000, I don't know what it's going to be, but say it went up, how that applies to the homeowner when he has to write a check as far as an increase in the taxes that they do pay because of the elevated evaluation. So I'd like to see something on that, and I'd like to see something about the revenue that's brought in, divided out somehow with new construction, and how that affects the individual taxing districts, because it brings it up well above the 1%, but it can't go above 1%, so everybody's goes down somehow. I mean, it's kind of a exercise in local economics, I guess, on the tax base. Is that kind of what you had in mind, Robin, for in the future?
Yes, this is what I need to know is what else do you want to know to be able to make a decision on this? So this is exactly, I'll get to you, Commissioner Menser. I hesitate, I cannot speak to other jurisdictions, and I can certainly show you the impact of the Thurston County property tax for any given fund that we collect on based on a price of a home because it's per thousand. But what I won't be able to say is what any individual's property tax is going to change because that has so many factors.
Okay, that's fine.
But I'll get you what I can. Commissioner Menser?
Just on that, isn't on this sheet, just to make sure I understand it, the levy rate of $1.16 converting to $4 in 2021, isn't that sort of the answer to part of the answer to Commissioner's question about about the change. Okay, so make sure I understood that. And then my question is, how many times you said it's been 4 times in this decade and once before that. So out of the 5 times where sounds like there were 5 times that the 1% IDT, whatever it is, IPD, didn't make it. How many times out of those did the commissioners decide not to do a substantial need resolution and take the 1%?
Did they decide not to do it?
Yeah, how many times has Thurston County Commission not taken the full 1%?
None.
Never happened.
On every occasion, they passed a resolution of substantial need and took the entire 1%.
Okay, thank you.
And Robin, did they take that entire percent across the board there with current expense roads, medical, and conservation futures? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else, gentlemen, that you need?
No,
Well, if you think of something, in the meantime, shoot an email to Robin or her team so we can get the information. They have sufficient time to work on it and put it together for us.
I will bring this item again on Tuesday morning for you to continue the conversation. I don't know if staff will have the time to gather all the requests, Robin, or at least a portion of that by then.
I think I can work on some of it by then. I'll have some of it for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Very good. And bring anything else you think we might need. Anticipate us. Come on.
Are you asking to read a commissioner's mind?
Yeah, please read my mind.
Wow.
It'd be scary.
That is a high bar.
That would be scary. All right. Does that wrap it up then?
So that wraps it up. It's noon, and I know you have other commitments. So I just want to thank you so much for all the work over the last 2 weeks.
Oh, God, thank you for all the work.
And, yep.
We just sat, listened, and asked questions. You folks did all the work. So thank you very much. I mean, you're catering to every need. So thank you. Thank you, kind of, because it's important. So have a good afternoon and weekend. And we'll see you again Monday. All right.